Good afternoon, folks. Today, well, we've obviously gone through almost every war. Well, we've made it to half point of our century. That's right, the American Civil War. A lot of battles in this war. That could have changed everything. I mean, let's start it. Let's look at all these battles here. I mean, literally almost everything that occurred in this whole battle that pretty much will change everything. This pretty much will change the way we look at life nowadays. What did the Civil War do back in those days that changed the way we look at it today? A lot. People look at the Confederacy as a symbol of hate. People look at the Confederate flag as a symbol of hate. People look at Confederate statues as a symbol of hate. Why? Because it represented slavery. It all depends who you ask what the Civil War was all about. Let's start it right here. What was the Civil War all about? It all depends who you ask, like I said before. Let's put it this way. Back in those days, it's kind of different than what it is today. We all say Republicans, back then, believe it or not, were actually liberals. Because they wanted to change the culture of slavery. And the slavery were conservatives. They wanted to keep it all the same. They wanted to keep the South. It was pretty much what fought over state rights. It's pretty much what it was. They wanted to keep slave states as slave states and keep free states as free states. That's pretty much how they wanted to keep it. Kind of like how the Bill of Rights, kind of like my first video, how we made the Bill of Rights. I mean, but if you added the 13th Amendment back in those days, in there, not sure if we would have had a Civil War then. Who knows? Anything could have been possible. But I mean, to be all honest with you, who knows if we ever would have had slaves if it had been for Great Britain bringing over their slaves during that time frame when we were only known as Great Britain, before we got our independence from Great Britain to start the United States. Who knows if we would have had slaves then? Just a thought. I mean, they could have started this whole thing. What they should have done, taken their slaves with them and left. But you know what? We didn't. They didn't. But we could have abolished slavery back in the day and just added the two amendments before the 13th Amendment, and added the 13th Amendment, we could have abolished slavery then. But we didn't. But what were some key battles back in the day that were successful for the Americans? So many. For the Union and Confederacy. There were so many battles. Let's read through my book and see which ones that were the most key. I mean, obviously, the states that seceded from the Union, that was the main thing. Then all the southern states, to start the war off, we all know Battle of Sumter, which went to the Confederates. Big time victory for the Confederates. We all know about that. But Winfield Scott had a plan. Like I said about one right before the Civil War, Winfield Scott had a simple plan. It was very, very simple. I mean, I can easily go on with this for Winfield Scott. His plan was pretty much will cover Florida, go around, pretty much will do a blockade. Cover the Mississippi River, go up through the Ohio River, go up to the Mississippi, all the way up to the Ohio River, go up the Ohio River into the Pennsylvania area till it reaches the Allegheny River. Pretty much the three-river city is what everybody calls it. But pretty much, that would clog any chances that they would get. And they took that into very strong heart. And it pretty much worked. Literally. But that's pretty much how you gotta look at certain things. Then you have Bull Run, which pretty much went right to them, went right to the Confederates. The thing about Bull Run was one thing. This is where Stonewall Jackson got his name. It seemed almost like this was going to be the battle that the Union could have easily just sent the Confederates packing. Easy victory. It almost looked like it was going to happen too. But no. Stonewall Jackson led a large charge and threw them down. Nothing left of the They pretty much overran the Union and sent them packing. Easy victory for then I made it look like a simple Confederate victory. Then we get other victories. Then you have other smaller victories that really were led up to nothing through the simple victories. It's just easy wins for certain groups. 1861, pretty much, then McClellan had a little plan of his own, and who would later run for president against Lincoln, but Lincoln ended up winning re-election. Then Johnston ran in the Shenandoah Valley with Stonewall Jackson, pretty much, against McClellan, and that pretty much what hurt them. But the Vicksburg campaign, which we will get to later, in 1862, famous general, soon to be, at the time he was colonel, but soon to be American president from Ohio, my home state, aka known as James Abram Garfield, led a battle at Middle Creek in Kentucky. Victory there for the United States, for the Union. But what was the difference in that battle? It wasn't really much of a significant victory, but it forced the Confederates out of the area, which helped a lot for the Americans. It helped a lot for the Union, because what it did for the Union was keep the Confederates from trying to get any further north. But then, other small little, like Mill Springs, which was also a big Union victory. Another kind of significant battle, which isn't that much further than Middle Creek, a few hundred miles southwest of Middle Creek. Another big-time victory for the Union. And then the Tennessee River, some big-time victories there. Then Grant, who pretty much, helped up around through there. Bellow, who sent troops there. It was a victory at Fort Henry. Big-time victory for the Union. This was in 1862. Fort Donelson, big-time victory for the Union. And then it just keeps on they're just heading that much closer to getting to Vicksburg. That's pretty much the march to Vicksburg. Then there's Shiloh. Before they get there, they hit Shiloh. Shiloh and Corinth. I mean, that's pretty much what this was a march to Shiloh and Corinth. Shiloh, where James Abram Garfield was promoted to Brigadier General after his win over at Middle Creek. That was his promotion to Brigadier General. After his win there, he pretty much, helped at Shiloh and Corinth. And pretty much, walked all over everybody and helped them win at Shiloh. And pretty much, a big victory there. And April through May, Shiloh pretty much, went straight there. And pretty much, was a hard-earned victory. Then the Valley Campaign occurred in the Shenandoah Valley. The first one, which was in 1862, hands down, all went to the Confederates. and a handful of victories that should have gone one way, but seemed like this part was pretty much just going to go straight to the Confederates. The Confederacy was still going. Everything pretty much, well, going the Confederates' way. Pretty much, well, everything going highly in favor of the... Then the 7 Days Offensive occurred. You had Mechanicsville, which technically surprisingly went to the Union. Big victory for the Union. And then there's Gaines Mill, that went to the Confederates. Big time victory there. Then the stalemate at Savage Station, that was a strategic draw. Then at Glendale, that was a withdrawal there. Then at Malvern Hill, McClellan defeats another badly coordinated attack by Lee, and that pretty much sends them all going. But what does this prove about? How did they lose? Because other attacks, Oak Grove and Shenandoah, 2 strongly attacks sent them packing. And then we get other battles, such as Frederick. Then McClellan heads south for the second Battle of Bull Run. And Stonewall Jackson roots him again, 1862 this time. Unbelievable, right? So, it just erupts in Longstreet and Stonewall Jackson. James Longstreet and Stonewall Jackson root McClellan again. So then he retreats, trying to find the right area. Sharpsburg, towards Sharpsburg and Antietam, trying to find the right area. Now we're getting somewhere, right? He runs right into Sharpsburg, Lee at Sharpsburg and Antietam, right there at Sharpsburg. Lo and behold. But while that's all going on, Bragg and Bellow fight there at big old Munfordville and Perryville, Kentucky. Pretty much will defeat. Then you head over here to Antietam. The area where the day after Antietam, Abraham Lincoln announces the Emancipation Proclamation, which states all slaves and slave-owned states are now free. They are no longer owned by slaves. They are now free people. And then they had Fredericksburg. But Fredericksburg and the other ones that occurred. Then Fredericksburg and other battles. Then you get the other one, Fredericksburg. A disaster. A disaster handed that right to him. Then the River Campaign began in 1862. Big victory. Right there at New Orleans, they start the Mississippi River towards Baton Rouge and Port Houston. Pretty much right up there, and down Mississippi, Pemberton, Holly Springs, Grant pretty much right there, and Sherman right at Memphis, trying to head down the river to Vicksburg, pretty much pushing them around. Big time victories. Burnside up there, in the aftermath of the disaster at Fredericksburg. Pretty much then you got Stones River. Big time victory for the Union at Stones River. Pretty much what looked like everything was heading back in the hands of the Union. With those wins. But they're not quite big victories yet. Because you still had Gettysburg. But then Chancellorsville occurred before Gettysburg. And Chancellorsville was also a disaster. But on the other hand, kind of a victory for the Union, because they took down one major general that literally led them all to victory. Stonewall Jackson. Stonewall Jackson died of his wounds, was wounded in action, but wounded enough where it killed him. And then, that was at Chancellorsville. Chancellorsville was a disaster for the Union. They still lost. But they kept on advancing. And when the war just kept on going strong for them, it just kept on making them look bad. So, the Union looked like they were crushed. The one question was, what do we have? General Lee was heading northward after Fredericksburg, thinking he could crush them at Gettysburg. And he just about did. Only one thing he could do. A large bayonet. Picket. Pickett's charge. Famous words for Pickett's charge. They came charging. Literally shooting everything at them they could shoot. Pickett pretty much did it. This was the battle that changed the whole war. Just like how Benedict Arnold changed the whole entire outcome of the Revolutionary War when he sent troops charging at the enemy. Similar circumstances, right? Well, let's continue. Benedict Arnold just kept, well, not Benedict Arnold, but General Meade this time. This time General Meade fired his cannons constantly at the charging Confederates. That included Pickett himself. And then, sure enough, it just fell apart. Gettysburg just kept falling. But yet, Longstreet fired at will. But yet, they just kept on falling apart. Ewell, Pickett, and Longstreet. Pickett fell flat on his face when everything didn't go his way. Literally, the batteries on both ends just could not withstand their charge. Lee retreated in disorder. The Union triumphed at Vicksburg and Gettysburg pretty much will change the whole entire outcome of the entire war. Two battles at the same time changed the whole entire outcome of the whole war. Who would have known that? And then you had the other battle, Morgan's raid throughout different areas through Kentucky, Indiana, and Ohio. But at Salmonville, he surrendered because he had no more. He was pretty much out of ammo. Even though he was raiding, he was pretty much out of ammo. Salmonville, Ohio, and other battles. He pretty much was out of war, out of ammo. It's just what you call war. Then Murfreesboro to Chickamauga. Murfreesboro, big victory for the Union, but Chickamauga was a big victory for the Confederacy. But still, the war was going in favor of the Union now. In 1863. It's just starting to go in the favor of the Union. But your question, what is the difference between this and the Union? The Union is just starting to prove that it does not quit. The Union didn't quit. Now Grant, on the other hand, in the wilderness, it seemed to come to a strategic draw. A very strong strategic draw despite some areas of victory for Grant. Some strong areas of victory for Grant, others didn't go for him. And then you had other spots that went for victory for others, for Lee. And then 1864 came, the Great March. soon to begin. Sherman began with simple battles. Battle of Atlanta, premature Battle of Peachtree Creek, big time victory. In Battle of Atlanta, big time victory. Ezra Church, a lot of victories all along the line for the Union. Pretty much will push them all down through the line. And the Union pretty much will just walked all the way through. The Union pretty much will took care of business. And then, once the area is all cut off, there's nothing left. Sherman pretty much will cut all supplies off. Then Sherman works his way north. He's pretty much will start asking. Then on April 9th, pretty much will the Civil War, not necessarily April 9th, but pretty much will the Civil War ends in 1865. But you ask yourself, how does the Civil War, what was the purpose of the Civil War? It was a pretty much a useless war in some sorts of ways. But mostly, war is war. People fought over this war for one reason. Because it's what they believed in. That's what this war was pretty much all about. That's what that war was all about. Each war had its purpose. But now, when it comes to propaganda, that'll be our next war that we're going to talk about. The Spanish-American War. We'll talk about that one here shortly. On our next segment. Right now, I gotta get out of here because I got things I gotta do. Peace.